Good evening there, everybody. What is happening? Hopefully, y'all are having a wonderful day today. So, when it comes down to it, I thought, of course, that I would talk about this little video and talk about this subject that I thought would be very particularly interesting. And for those of you, of course, that do not know, tomorrow on Saturday, I believe that the date's going to be July 19th. But if I'm wrong about that, someone correct me. But, anyways, there's going to be a certain amount of big fights that end up happening tomorrow. But of course, the biggest fight that everyone is probably going to be paying attention to, at least within that of the boxing world, of course, is going to be the rematch between that of Oleksandr Usyk versus Danny Dubois. And of course, you have a certain amount of predictions that are kind of going all over the place. You have certain people, of course, and I would assume that the majority of people, excuse me, are probably predicting that Oleksandr Usyk will win this fight. But you do have a handful of people that believe that Danny Dubois, that he is a fresher fighter, that he's a different fighter, and that he will attack Oleksandr Usyk and come out with the right style in order to beat that of Oleksandr Usyk. Do I believe that that's going to happen? More than likely not, but of course you never know. We've seen certain upsets in boxing. We've seen certain times where the fight ended up a little bit differently than what we had expected. And of course, although I do get the majority of my fight predictions correct, of course, I've been wrong on a certain amount of them. No one, of course, gets all their fight predictions correct. But the thing is that, I just thought that this would be a very interesting time to review ShowBizz The Adult because I think that I had a few people ask me to review this channel because I've never really reviewed ShowBizz The Adult. Now, if you ask my personal opinion about ShowBizz The Adult, what do I think about his boxing channel? I think that he brings a lot of positives overall to boxing. Now, that being stated, do I think that he's someone that I would ever claim is a super great boxing analyst or boxing breakdown artist? No, he's not someone that I would ever claim to be that. But to me, you don't really have to be a super successful boxing channel in order overall to really be correct with your predictions or break things down in a correct way. To be quite honest with you, the only channels that, to be honest with you, I really respect their breakdown abilities would be guys like Boxing Gems, I believe, guys like that. I believe of what's his name, Boxing Wave, Hatman Strikes Back. To be honest with you, that's really about the only channels that I would give a certain amount of credit to their actual, analytic abilities. Just my personal view of it. Now, certain people overall, they may disagree with that, but that's just my personal view. Channels like ShowBizz The Adult, Dante's Boxing Nation, other guys like that, they bring certain positives, maybe certain negatives as well. But I mean, one thing I'll say about ShowBizz is this. At least ShowBizz The Adult, in my view, at least from what I've seen of him, doesn't usually have a quote-unquote narrative afoot. Now, he may state certain narratives, he may state certain things that I disagree with, but one thing I'll state about ShowBizz is that at least he does not appear to have a racialist element or someone overall that clearly is motivated completely by race like that of a Dante's Boxing Nation or Aki TV or some of these other channels. Of course, I've heard a lot about BDA Boxing, but I've never really seen that channel. His videos are a little bit too long for me, so I don't know, I'd have to watch it. But I mean, the point is that ShowBizz The Adult, at least he overall doesn't come across as someone that's trying to sell you something that you can tell he does not even truly believe. Once again, is he someone that I would ever say is a great analyst breakdown artist? No. He's not someone that I would ever say is a great boxing analyst. But 99.9% of people who watch boxing, even if they've been watching boxing for 30 plus years, they're not great at breaking the sport down. So, I mean, it just depends on the person. But anyways, that being stated, ShowBizz The Adult stated some interesting points within this video, and the question is, can Danny Dubois actually beat Oleksandr Usyk in the rematch? In my view, yes, he can. I wouldn't favor him to do it, but of course, anything is possible. But let's get into it. Let's see some of ShowBizz The Adult's points because he brought up some points that I thought were very particularly interesting. And of course, within this video, I'm also going to give my fight predictions of the Manny Pacquiao versus Mario Barrios fight, as well as the Tim Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora rematch, and maybe even talk a little bit about UFC 318, which of course is the final send-off fight for Dustin Poirier. So we'll see overall what ends up happening there. And I may even go live for the main event of Oleksandr Usyk versus Danny Dubois tomorrow as well. But let's see. But anyways, I'm going to give my boxing analyses. I could be wrong, but we'll see. But anyways, let's get into it. Let's see what ShowBizz has to say.
Live only on the Zone. He silenced Britain's best. Usyk, the Brit.
And let me also apologize to my man, Blitz Tactic, or, overall, whatever his name is now. I think he's changed it around a couple times. Because unfortunately right now, I cannot use the ad blocker. So I'm going to try to cut the ad short. But I wanted to apologize there because my man Blitz Tactic has always told me to install an ad blocker. I've had an ad blocker as of recent, but unfortunately, something's going on with it at the current moment in time. I can't really use it right now. But don't worry, I'll make the ad short. Anyway.
Breaker, but now the dynamite is ready to explode. One night, one shot, and undisputed. Usyk versus Dubois 2, July 19th. Buy now at thezone.com/boxing.
Don't push the horses.
Pardon me?
Don't push the horses.
Don't push what?
Don't push the horses.
I need that translator.
War Room, I'm about to do it. I'm about to do it, War Room. I'm going to bet $10,000 on Daniel Dubois beating Oleksandr Usyk on my...
I need to know who told ShowBizz that it was a good idea to have that half a mohawk over on the back of his head.
Okay.
Don't push the horses.
I'm about to do it.
Don't push the horses.
I know it's a gamble. I know who Usyk is. All-time great. But I think it's Dubois' time now. And I think Dubois is the perfect heavyweight right now to beat Usyk.
Well, I actually don't agree with that. And the reason why I personally state that is because if you're actually talking about someone that may overwhelm Usyk, especially on the inside game, in my personal view, you're talking about someone like a Ajit Cabello. That would be someone that, if that fight were to happen next, that would be a little bit of an interesting fight because Cabello is someone that is very strong. He's someone that is very good on the inside game. He can box relatively well, and he has very good level of power. That would be a fight overall that would actually be very particularly interesting because, of course, we have seen slight success against Usyk in the past, where fighters, of course, do pressure him a little bit. But, of course, Usyk has usually even adapted to those type of styles. It's not that he can't handle that type of style, but, of course, he's not a natural heavyweight. Now, that being stated, do I think that Daniel Dubois is just going to go in there and completely wear down Usyk and, break him down over time? I think that he'll have some slight success in the early rounds. I think that Usyk, it'll take him a couple of rounds, maybe a few rounds, to kind of see, how he's going to read that of a Daniel Dubois or take the approach. But I think eventually Usyk will start to become successful. And I think, excuse me, and I think eventually that he will start to break Daniel Dubois down, just in my personal view. I don't think Daniel Dubois has the type of style in order to really break Usyk down the way that many people are predicting. He's just not that type of fighter. Now, he is a guy that will try to break certain people down, but he's really a guy that likes to work a little bit more behind his jab, fight a little bit more within the mid-range, and get you with 1-2s. That's kind of more the style of a Daniel Dubois. He's not a guy that's just going to come forward the whole entire time and try to break you down. Now, he did do it a little bit with certain people like that of an AJ Anthony Joshua, but even if you take a look at the beginning of that fight, he was hitting AJ Anthony Joshua within the mid-range and jabs. He didn't just go in there willy-nilly and basically just try to destroy AJ Anthony Joshua, by all means necessary. Now, Daniel Dubois, of course, he kind of did against Filip Hrgović to a degree, but Filip Hrgović had no gas tank, basically after like 6 rounds. So, I mean, it is what it is. But anyways, and don't get it twisted. That's not me trying to, not give credit for those wins. He deserves a great amount of credit for his last 3 wins. But I don't think that this style of him pressuring Usyk, first of all, I don't think he's that type of fighter. And second of all, I don't think it's going to work. Not with Daniel Dubois. He's not a fighter that does that. He's not a fighter that will just go in there and try to wear you down and is super great on the inside, especially compared to Usyk. Usyk, in my view, is just a little bit too quick. He's a little bit too maneuverable. And I think that he's a little bit too intelligent for Daniel Dubois, at least for him, in that type of style for it to work. He's not someone that, in my view, is an elite inside level fighter. But anyways, let's continue.
His mindset. Not just that, his experience with Usyk. Dubois knows, I think he knows, how to approach Usyk in a way many other heavyweights haven't been able to or chose not to. Let me break it down. Here's my theory. I think Usyk has been taking advantage of these big, slow heavyweights, all right? And I told you guys, those big, slow heavyweights would have been food back in the 90s and any time before because the heavy...
Well, that's something that I actually don't agree with. Now, what I will personally state is this. When you talk about Oleksandr Usyk fighting guys like Tyson Fury and AJ Anthony Joshua, he was able to take advantage to a certain degree because those guys, of course, they're super heavyweights. And of course, if you know how to use your smaller size to your advantage, and move out of the way of punches and, kind of be super maneuverable, use your feet. And on top of that, your upper body movement, the way that Usyk can do. And then on top of that, or the way that Oleksandr Usyk does. And then on top of that, Oleksandr Usyk can basically hit you wherever he wants to almost at a multitude of different angles. It, of course, is going to be very difficult. Tyson Fury and AJ Anthony Joshua, they may have the weight advantage, but if you're smaller and if you know how to use that movement to your advantage, if you're a Manny Pacquiao or a Canelo or a Usyk, it can eventually turn into an advantage because it's basically like someone trying to hit a fly. The first 10 swats overall, or the first, 50 swats, you may not feel all that much. But once you get to about 150 to 200 swats, your arms start to get tired, your legs start to get tired, you start to get a little bit more gassed, your mentality is a little bit different, so once again, it's completely different the first 4 rounds versus the final 8.
Weights back then can move. What Usyk did to the likes of Tyson Fury, AJ, the rest of those boys.
Experience internet like never.
Slow heavyweights would have been food back in the 90s. And anytime before, because the heavyweights back then can move.
Well, the heavyweights back then definitely could move, but if you're talking about all the heavyweights of this generation just quote unquote being quote unquote food, I don't agree with that sentiment. When you talk about guys like AJ Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, and Tyson Fury, I'm not claiming that they were all more skilled than the fighters back in the 90s or something like that, but they would have had their opportunity to possibly become champions. I mean, the thing is this, people always love to come up with this narrative that these fighters from 20, 30 years ago were way better than the fighters of the day. I always hear this, that Floyd Mayweather would have never lasted against the Four Kings, that Canelo would have never beat Oscar De La Hoya, that, all this other shit. And it's just not the case. When you talk about, the 90s or the 80s, at the end of the day, Mike Tyson, he was a great fighter, massively overrated, but he's someone overall that, of course, was a great fighter, but it's not like his record was impeccable. He ended up losing to someone like a James Buster Douglas. If James Buster Douglas can beat Mike Tyson, why would certain guys like AJ Anthony Joshua, Tyson Fury, Deontay Wilder, and especially Oleksandr Usyk not have a chance against Mike Tyson? Like, it doesn't make any sense. Every time Mike Tyson really was in a big fight in his career, he pretty much ended up getting his ass kicked. It just is what it is. And then when you also take a look at Evander Holyfield, of course, all-time great level fighter. But if he can damn near get his head knocked off against a journeyman of Burt Cooper, if he's someone that can lose to Michael Moore, if he's someone overall where some of these other things pop up, well, who's to say that Usyk or some of these other guys like a Tyson Fury wouldn't stand a chance? When you take a look even at Lennox Lewis, you're talking about a guy, of course, that was an all-time great level fighter, debatably up there with any heavyweight within history, in my view. Excuse me. But anyways, the point being is that Lennox Lewis, he did get chinned and he got knocked out by 2 guys who never should have been heavyweight champion in the first place. If Oliver McCall can become heavyweight champion and beat Lennox Lewis, and if Hassan Rahman can beat him, then of course guys like AJ Anthony Joshua and Deontay Wilder and Usyk and Fury would have had a possible opportunity to win the belts back then. So, I mean, the thing is this, you can make the point that they're slower and all this sort of stuff, that, you can make that point, but it's not like they were Nikolai Valuev or something like that, who basically had a very low level of skill. These guys overall were legit champions, and they were guys that at least had some sort of skills. Not saying that they were necessarily as skilled as certain guys like Holyfield or certain guys like Lennox Lewis, at least guys like AJ or Deontay Wilder. I think Fury could have possibly competed with them a little bit in terms of the skills department. But I mean, the thing is that they still would have had a chance, because they would have been super heavyweights, and although, yes, they weren't quite as skilled, their size and their level of strength and power could have been something that could have been an issue.
Usyk did to the likes of Tyson Fury, AJ, the rest of those boys.
Glamour division of boxing, and these guys are not letting us down. Fury's in trouble. The big fella, the Gypsy King.
But I think Usyk wouldn't compete well in the 90s as well.
And I don't agree with that whatsoever. When you talk about all-time great level fighters, I don't care who you are, you're going to compete great in any era when it comes down to it. At least, if overall you somehow combined, the skills and, that of this particular era. I mean, it's hard to compare because, of course, usually the further we go on down the line, they not only take what those past fighters did, but then they improve on what those fighters did. So it's always a little bit troubling. So when people, talk about who would have won between Lennox Lewis and Oleksandr Usyk, it's a little bit hard because Lennox Lewis was a fighter from 20 years ago. So, I mean, or Muhammad Ali. Muhammad Ali, he was at his peak during the 60s and 70s. So, I mean, the thing is that's a little bit hard to compare. But this narrative that these fighters, that they just couldn't, they couldn't compete back then, all that is horseshit. And I've been hearing this overall for a very long time. But this is something that has been going not only in boxing, but in every sport. This is a narrative in every sport, that these guys wouldn't be able to compete. I hear the same thing with Steph Curry and basketball, that Steph Curry wouldn't be able to compete back in the 90s. All sort of horseshit.
Because I believe that in order to beat Usyk, you just got to go get it. You have to be athletic enough, and you have to punch hard enough to go get it. You have to be Clubber Lang.
Well, Oleksandr Usyk has shown a little bit of a problem if you really try to get within his range and make him uncomfortable. But even that has not shown to completely offset him, because we've seen it a little bit with Tyson Fury, we've seen it a little bit with AJ Anthony Joshua, a little bit with Danny Dubois, and a little bit with some other fighters. And Usyk has shown an adjustment to the body shots, or that he at least can handle them. We've seen it against Tyson Fury, and he's just shown a greater ability, overall to adjust. So Oleksandr Usyk deserves a great amount of credit. Now, once again, do I think that he may have a problem maybe with a fighter that can pressure him 24/7? I mean, maybe. But I mean, those fighters, to be quite honest with you, give anybody trouble. That's why, for example, when you take a look at guys like Derek Chisora or guys like a Sean Porter, those guys are known as quote-unquote truth machine fighters. Guys overall to where they're not maybe as technical as some other fighters that you may see. Like Joe Frazier is probably not as an all-around skilled fighter as what a Mike Tyson was. But the thing is that Joe Frazier, now Mike Tyson, of course, was kind of a similar fighter because, he was going to come in, but Joe Frazier, I think, had a little bit more grit than Mike Tyson, more mental toughness. Joe Frazier was a guy to where, he was going to show you what you were really made out of. Sean Porter and Derek Chisora are two very similar fighters. That's why Sean Porter, although he's not as technically sound as an Errol Spence Jr., he gave Terrence Bud Crawford a way tougher fight than what Errol Spence Jr. did, because his style is a lot more unpredictable. And sometimes it's worse to fight styles that are more unpredictable and just go balls to the wall and you don't know exactly what to expect from them, versus a guy to where you kind of know what his plan of attack is.
Usyk, he's got to push on though, Fury. He's got to go at him though. Andy Lee's is saying exactly that in the corner.
See, Usyk actually turned, crunched down and actually turned. He actually blocked the body shot very well there. Great uppercut by Fury.
But you have to be in the shape. See, the fighters in the 90s, the 70s, the 80s, they were in shape. Just like a heavyweight should be. You should just be.
Well, the fighters from the 80s and 90s, yes, a lot of them were in shape. But let's not do this shit to where a lot of the fighters today just aren't quote-unquote in shape. When you talk about AJ Anthony Joshua, he's in shape. It's just that he's a little bit too muscle-bound. He needs to lose a little bit of that muscle, so that's why he would lose certain stamina as the rounds would go on. But he was in shape. Deontay Wilder was in shape. Tyson Fury, although he looks a little bit flabby, he's in shape. All right, so I mean, it is what it is. Ajit Kabayel is in shape. All right, Dillian White is in shape. Although he has a little bit of flab to him. But this stuff overall about, these guys, these heavyweights being in much better shape back in the 90s, all star stuff. I mean, what I will personally state is this. During the Klitschko era, for example, the Vladimir Klitschko era, that was really the era of a whole bunch of fat asses, where you had a whole bunch of people overall that had beer bellies and all sort of stuff, like Kubrat Pulev and some of these other guys. That was kind of the era overall where a lot of fighters were not really in great shape. This is not the era overall to talk about that in. But even if you talk about the 80s and 90s, when you talk about it, there is still a certain amount of fighters overall that usually, a lot of the times, were not in great shape. Just take a look at Evander Holyfield's fight against James Buster Douglas. James Buster Douglas was in the greatest shape of his life for like one fight against Mike Tyson. He could never overall keep the discipline going. He always had a hunger problem, I believe, and he always had, an eating disorder or something like that. He eventually become like morbidly obese at about like 400 pounds, I believe. But take a look at his conditioning in the Evander Holyfield fight. The man had a beer belly and man titties. I mean, it just is what it is. And then, of course, you had other fighters like Buster Mathis and Buster Mathis Jr. They were both kind of chubby overall for that. When you take a look at other fighters, like when you take a look at a lot of the fighters that Mike Tyson fought, a lot of people may not know this, but a lot of those guys were on drugs. Like a lot of those guys had alcoholism issues. They had cocaine problems. Pinkerton Thomas, James Bone Crusher Smith, like a lot of those guys were on heavy, heavy drugs. So all this stuff about how those guys were in great shape. Of course, a lot of those fighters are in great shape, but not every one of them was in great shape. So I mean, let's stop this narrative.
Fighting shape. Usyk, he can pick apart those big, slow heavyweights. By the time he was picking apart Tyson Fury, his legs were gone. I was telling you guys that. So Usyk.
Agreed, which is why I predicted Oleksandr Usyk to win the rematch. And this is why I always state that even a lot of former professional boxers, they don't really know what the fuck they're watching. And I understand a certain amount of people overall, they're going to be a little bit incredulous as to what I state there. But what you notice oftentimes is that the best boxing analysts or best boxing breakdown artists, they're not usually boxers, or they're usually coaches, somewhere around there, because all-time great athletes, they usually don't do a very good job of breaking down certain things. Not usually. Now, there's exceptions to the rule. I think Sugar Shane Mosley, to a degree, is a good breakdown analyst. Andre Ward, some other ones, that I'm not thinking of. Carl Frampton, maybe, of course, I just seen his recent analysis. But the thing is that, like, many people, when they take a look at that Tyson Fury and Oleksandr Usyk first fight, you had so many people, like I seen Sean Porter state that, oh, well, I think overall that Tyson Fury was winning the fight until he got hurt and he never really recovered. No, that's not what happened. Tyson Fury started getting hit because he was not able to deal with Usyk's angles and his movement. And overall, eventually, he got tired. When you're trying to hit that fly, like I stated, you're not going to feel it within the first 50 strikes. But once you get 200, 300 strikes in, and you still can't hit him consistently, you're going to feel it. You're going to feel it in your legs. You're going to feel it in your arms. You're going to feel it in your shoulders. You're going to start to tire out. And Fury usually has a great gas tank, but Usyk is just someone that was the perfect type of style to defeat someone like a Tyson Fury. And that's why when I took a look at that fight, Fury was starting to get hit, not necessarily because Usyk just got the right shot in there, but because he was starting to get tired. He couldn't deal with Usyk's movement. It just is what it is.
Pick him apart, jump in, and be where he wants to be when he wants to, and be out of range.
Fury had a chance maybe to step on the gas there, but again, he elects to fight going backwards.
Once again, Usyk's constant head movement and his constant, footwork and, his constant movement at the angles and trying to attack you from different angles is just exhausting for a lot of these guys. And Danny Dubois is someone that, in my view, although he's quick and relatively strong, he's not quick nor strong enough. I mean, he's strong enough, I shouldn't say that, but he's someone overall that, in my personal view, he just doesn't have the type of style. I think what certain people are thinking is that Danny Dubois is going to try to go in there, immediately and try to, rush after him. And I think that he's going to try. I think that he's going to try within the first couple of few rounds, but I think eventually that it's only going to work so much. And I think once Usyk starts to get in some counters, I think Danny Dubois is basically going to resort to the same fighter that he once was, and eventually he will gas out.
Tyson Fury, bit of a boxer, big guy, bit of a boxer. When he was starting to kind of walk Usyk down, he was having some success. But Usyk footwork was just too good. AJ decided to box Usyk. The thing is, Usyk hand speed kind of intimidated AJ a little bit. Kind of made...
Well, everything about Usyk intimidated AJ Anthony Joshua. AJ Anthony Joshua is a guy that he can try to pressure you, but he's a guy that prefers to fight within the mid-range or the long range. That's what AJ prefers to do. So when Oleksandr Usyk, when he ended up overall beating AJ Anthony Joshua in the mid-range, Joshua basically didn't know what to do because the movement was just way too much for him. Usyk basically had every advantage over him skills-wise. So, I mean, the only chance was that AJ was going to catch Usyk with a very great punch, and then eventually, he was going to get knocked out or knocked down a couple times. Of course, it didn't happen.
Him a little weary because Usyk can hurt him, right? So he had to try to use his size as far as his range to try to box with Usyk. That's why he did that. If he would have just went forward, Usyk would have hurt him. He hurt him in the first fight. Dubois, on the other hand, I think Usyk beat Dubois the first time because he gassed. He wasn't in the right shape. Dubois been...
Well, here's the question that I have for you, sir. Is Dubois really going to be in better shape against Oleksandr Usyk? I assume that you're basing this off of the last 3 fights that we've seen Danny Dubois in. But the thing, from what I remember, I believe that Dubois had a full training camp against Usyk. If I'm wrong about that, someone can correct me, but I believe that he did. And on top of that, the last 3 fights that Dubois has had, it's no offense against those guys, but those guys have nowhere near the gas tank of an Oleksandr Usyk, nor do they have anywhere near the movement or the all-around skill. When you talk about a Jarrell Big Baby Miller, that was his first fight in years, and on top of that, he came in at 320 pounds? The man was a fat ass. The man's really always been a fat ass. But I mean, the thing is that he came in there even heavier than what he usually was. So, I mean, to me, that's just not a great indication of how his stamina is going to hold up against Usyk. And then the next fight, of course, I believe that he fought a Filip Pergovic who completely gassed out within about 6 rounds. Someone that, in my view, has never really had a great gas tank in the first place, and someone whose skill set, in my view, has always been a bit overrated. But I mean, it is what it is. And then, of course, you talk about AJ Anthony Joshua, someone that's never really had, an elite level gas tank either. And someone that's always been too hittable. So I mean, I'm not discrediting his wins. I think that they're all great wins, especially for his recent record. But the thing is that I think that those styles were more good for Danny Dubois to look good than what an Oleksandr Usyk style is. Unless Usyk just, gets too timid and just decides not to throw for the first half of the fight, like what a Lomachenko did against Teofimo Lopez. But I don't see that happening.
Been focused. He's definitely in shape now. I think Dubois understands to go Clubber Lincoln. Don't let Usyk be where he wants to be. Pot shot, move around, throw his combinations.
I think he's going to try. But in order for that to happen, first of all, you have to have an excellent boxing IQ. Second of all, you have to have, the feet good enough overall to do that and the upper body movement. I don't think that he has that. Now, there are certain fighters that don't have the best of feet, like Canelo Alvarez, for example, who can cut off the ring decently well, at this stage in his career, and of course he does it quite effectively. But Canelo Alvarez has a skill overall that is very hard to attain, which is excellent upper body movement, which really limits the amount of times that he's going to get hit and hit flush. So, I mean, Canelo Alvarez has that. Danny Dubois is not someone with excellent upper body movement. He's a little bit too hittable and a little bit too open with his defense.
In and out, has his angles. Just go in there and bang, bang.
Well, I think overall that he's going to try that, but I don't know how successful he's going to be. And I think that style is only going to work for about a couple rounds, and I think that Usyk is more than likely going to adjust. He's not the fighter, in my personal view, to do that against Oleksandr Usyk. Now, once again, a fighter that, in my view, that Usyk should definitely watch out for is someone like Ajit Caballel, because he's going to put the pressure and the pedal to the metal for all 12 rounds. He has an excellent gas tank. He's huge, especially girth-wise for that weight class, and he's a guy overall that is extremely skilled.
With 6 convenient.
Now, of course, Danny Dubois basically went balls to the wall against AJ Anthony Joshua here, but AJ Anthony Joshua, of course, is very hurt here. He cannot really occupy the vacated space. On top of that, his head is very straight up in the air, and I mean, on top of that, he also just doesn't have the quickest of feet. Oleksandr Usyk is not just going to stay up against the ropes.
I'm telling you, be a heavyweight. Just go get it. Have the hand speed. Go get him the way he went to go get AJ.
Needs to step in with a big.
Right, but even if you take a look at it here, what Danny Dubois is waiting for is that he's waiting for AJ Anthony Joshua to overextend. He's not just going in there going balls to the wall. He's hurting AJ Anthony Joshua at first, and then he's going balls to the wall. Now, can he do that with Oleksandr Usyk? I think that he's going to try, and I think that he'll be slightly successful in the early part of the fight. But I think that Oleksandr Usyk eventually is going to be able to adjust. He's just too skilled in my personal view.
He just went at AJ, had his shoulders high over here, and bam! Right?
AJ made so many mistakes within that fight, man. And I'll also state this. AJ was never the same after those Oleksandr Usyk fights. And I know a certain amount of people are going to heavily disagree with me, but, because they'll say, well, he wasn't ever the same after the Andrew Ruiz fight. Yeah, he wasn't ever quite the same after the Andrew Ruiz fight. There are certain fights overall, where in your career, you're never the same even after the first fight. But AJ still had a lot of life left within him, and he was an A-grade level champion when he still fought Usyk. Because when you would lose your first fight, and you win the rematch, at least you can say, okay, well, I've been there and done that. I went through adversity. I ended up beating him within the rematch. So I can do it again, even if I end up losing again. But the first time that you end up losing to someone 2 fights in a row, that's when your mentality completely changes. That's when you start asking, do I still have it? Am I really as good overall as what I thought that I was? It's completely different losing a fight but then winning the rematch, and then losing the rematch even when you make all these adjustments and change coaches and try to come up with a different game plan, because then you really start to get kind of mind fucked.
Just go get Usyk. I think he can pummel him. I think we're going to be shot. Matter of fact, let's just do it right now. Let's place our bet. Hold on, let me turn this off. Let's place our bet. Yep, I'm gonna do it. 10 stacks. We about to do it. Listen, man, my theory, I'm feeling good about my theory. I am. And this is a huge gamble, I know. But I'm feeling good about it. It's kind of how I felt about Usyk and Fury. I'm feeling good about it. Okay, here we go. Let me just go while I have the feel. I got to do it while Okay, let's go. Hold on. Let me...
Well, personally for you, man, I hope that you end up getting your money. I hope for your sake, for your $10,000. I mean, $10,000 to you probably isn't that much because ShowBizz is a relatively successful dude. And once again, I'm always cheering for ShowBizz. I don't think that he's the best boxing analyst, but I mean, he seems to be a very great TV personality. Someone that has a lot of charisma, seems like a very peppy and, gregarious guy. He's someone overall that, in my view, brings a lot of positives to the boxing game. Is he someone overall that, in my view, is the best boxing breakdown artist? No. But there's certain channels that you watch not because they're great boxing or not because they're great breakdown artists or great, analyzers, but just because they bring a lot of charisma and a lot of pizzazz. Like ShowBizz The Adult to boxing is kind of like what Chael Sonnen is to MMA. Chael Sonnen or to the UFC. Chael Sonnen is someone that has a great amount of personality, someone that has a great amount of charisma and pizzazz. He gets all his fight predictions wrong, but he's someone that brings a whole lot of energy.
Let me share the screen. Cue all this up. I'm going to place my bet now. Make sure you guys can see. I'm going to place my bet now. I already have. Let me make sure.
And let me give ShowBizz The Adult, because I believe that he does actually place the bet. Excuse me. Let me overall give him a certain amount of credit for actually putting his money where his mouth is. Because he could be one of these guys like Dante's Boxing Nation or Aki TV that talk all this shit, overall about how this fighter is going to beat this other fighter. And then once it doesn't happen that way, they just come up with 27 different excuses, just to talk a whole bunch of shit to tear down a fighter that they don't like because they very clearly have a racial motivation. So let me at least, give ShowBizz that amount of credit. Because you have a lot of these guys out here that talk all this shit, but they're not willing to put their money where their mouth is. And I'm not a betting man either. I'm not someone overall that would ever recommend someone betting on fights because you never know how it's going to go. But, I'm also not someone that does this bullshit of tearing down certain fighters over a narrative. Anyway.
Usyk, Dubois, just the main. Wait, hold on. Usyk by K. See? I can. Dubois by decision. Usyk, Dubois, main line, plus 280. I'm going to go with the max bet. I already saw earlier that is 10 grand for the max bet. Max bet, 10 grand to win $28,000. All right. Let's go. Woo! Let's go! Dubois, let's go! Give me my money. Give me my money. I want my money. I want my money.
Real or slime?
I want my money. I haven't made a $10,000 bet since when? Has it been since I lost, I think? Lomachenko, Teofimo Lopez? 10K on Dubois beating Usyk. It's my theory, man. I just feel it's like I was telling you guys, all it takes is for a smaller heavyweight who can move to beat these big, fat heavyweights sitting at the end of a jab. Beat them.
Well, I think that that's a part of the style that overall may be able to beat them, but you also have to be an all-time grade level fighter. You have to be someone that is like an Oleksandr Usyk, and there's very, 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 very few fighters that bring to the table what Oleksandr Usyk brings. He's someone that has a great gas tank, who's, I've really, to be quite honest with you, never seen tire out. And then on top of that, he still has a grade level power. He's someone that can hurt anyone in that weight class. He's someone overall that has excellent footwork, can move at a constant rate, someone that has excellent angles, excellent footwork, excellent head movement, excellent feet, and pretty much can fight competently within any range. So, I mean, yes, of course, that style probably is going to be their weakness, but you would have to be on the level of Oleksandr Usyk in the first place.
You're smaller and you can move. That's why I said the fighters from the 90s will whoop the big, fat, slow, super heavyweight.
Well, if you're talking about someone that couldn't move at all, then yeah, sure. If you're talking about someone like a Kubrat Pulev or something like that, yeah, I'd probably agree with that. But as for AJ or Deontay Wilder or Tyson Fury, no, I don't completely agree with that because Oleksandr Usyk, in my personal view, he's just a different animal overall than even what some of those guys were. Or at least overall, he does things a little bit differently. Anyway.
But Usyk, on the other hand, I think he would also be destroyed in the 90s because those heavyweights.
I might have to do a video one day about, who I think would have won those fights. Oleksandr Usyk versus Lennox Lewis, or Usyk versus Tyson, or Usyk versus Holyfield. I mean, if you ask me if Usyk would have fought Tyson, I think that it would have been quite easily Usyk. And I'm not stating that Tyson would have had no chance, but basically anytime Mike Tyson was in a very big fight against an all-time great level talent or someone that actually knew how to box him, he didn't just lose. He ended up getting stopped every time. Whether it was Lennox Lewis or Evander Holyfield or James Buster Douglas, he didn't win one of those fights. So, I mean, it is what it is. So, I mean, Oleksandr Usyk probably would have had some trouble in the beginning, but I think eventually Oleksandr Usyk would have eventually pulled through and probably stopped him. As for Evander Holyfield, great fighter, but he's someone overall that in my view more than likely would have lost to Usyk. He was just a little bit too hittable. All-time great level fighter, highly skilled. But someone that in my view was just a little bit too hittable. And if you don't believe me, take a look at his fights overall against Michael Moore. Take a look at his fights against Burt Cooper and some other ones. Evander was a great fighter, but he was not someone overall that had the defensive responsibility nor as good a movement as an Oleksandr Usyk. And certain people may disagree with that, but it is what it is. As for Lennox Lewis, that would have been a very interesting fight. I'm not really quite sure who would have won that fight. That would have been very interesting. But Lennox Lewis, of course, had a great amount of names on his resume. Lewis, of course, was an all-time grade level fighter. That would have been very interesting.
Move.
But what I will personally state is this. For anyone claiming overall that Usyk would have never stood a chance against Lennox Lewis, if Hassan Rahman and once again, Oliver McCall can chin Lennox Lewis, Oleksandr Usyk was an all-time grade level fighter and definitely levels above those guys, he would have a chance. And let's also not forget Vitaly Klitschko, who of course was also a part of the big, slow, quote-unquote stiff heavyweights. He was giving Lennox Lewis the work in a certain amount of that fight. So let's also not forget that. So these quote-unquote big, slow heavyweights are not as bad as what some people overall seem. So that's why I say, these people that say that these guys would have been quote-unquote food during the 90s, no, they wouldn't have.
Two. And I just think Dubois.
If guys like Frank Bruno overall can win a championship, if guys like Oliver McCall and Hassan Rahman can win a championship, AJ Anthony Joshua, Deontay Wilder, Tyson Fury, they would have all had a chance to win there too. The Klitschko brothers, they would have all had a shot.
With what he's learned, the type of shape he's in, coming in lighter, the power puncher he is, already with the experience with Usyk, hitting him with that body shot. Many people say it was, on the belt line. People think it's low. I think it was legal. Either way.
Well, I definitely thought it was low. But anyways.
He felt that he could hurt him. He knows.
That being stated, of course, we have seen Oleksandr Usyk vulnerable to body shots in the past, although he has adjusted to them. And we have seen him a little bit vulnerable to the pressurized style, so we'll see. I just don't think that Danny Dubois is really the right type of style to employ that, but we'll see.
He could hurt him, so I think Dubois comes out there winging, binging, dinging, and danging, and hurts Usyk multiple times and may even stop him. That's my $10,000. I hope you guys just understand that I do know it's a huge gamble. I'm sweating it out. I'm actually lightheaded right now. I do know it's a huge gamble. It's rooted in theory, okay, with logic. I do know how great Usyk is, but I just got this feeling it's Dubois. It's his time now. ShowBizz The Adult. I'm out. Huh.
Well, anyways, man, I hope that you actually end up winning your money just for your sake. But of course, I don't think he needs it that much. He's a relatively successful guy. And I'm glad that he is, once again, because ShowBizz, once again, not the best breakdown analyst in my view, but he's someone overall not the best boxing analyst, but someone that brings a great amount of color and boxing pizzazz overall to the sport. So I think that he's actually, someone that is somewhat necessary to the boxing sport, because you have many people within a multitude of sports that pretty much would be the same way. They're not the best at breaking down the sport, but they bring a lot of pizzazz. They bring a lot, of quote unquote jazz to the sport, just like Chael Sonnen in the UFC. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I guess I'll talk to you all later. As for the Manny Pacquiao versus Mario Barrios fight, I do predict that Manny Pacquiao more than likely will lose that fight, because I think that he's just a little bit too old, and I think overall that the last time that I seen him against Yordenis Ugas, his legs were just completely gone. He had no legs. And on top of that, Manny Pacquiao is not really someone that belongs at the 147-pound weight class anyway. He's really someone that belongs more at 140 or 135. So, I mean, it just is what it is. But anyways, overall that being stated. So, I mean, so you have that fight. I think Mario Barrios will just be a little bit too young. He's not someone that, in my view, I think has ever been an A-grade level champion. But he's someone that, in my view, will be just a little bit too athletic, a little bit too big. And I don't think that Manny Pacquiao, after being out of the ring for about 2 to 2.5 years, and of course not fighting for a while, and in his last fight, he looked basically completely washed. I don't think it's going to end up well for him. Now, as for the Tim Tszyu versus Sebastian Fundora rematch, that's going to be a very interesting match, because neither fighter had a full camp for the other fighter the first time that they fought each other. But I am going to predict Tim Tszyu to win that fight, because I think had the cut not happened, then more than likely he would have probably won that fight. Now, that being stated, once again, he wasn't supposed to fight Fundora. Fundora was supposed to, he was basically a backup replacement. He was originally supposed to fight Keith Thurman. Tim Tszyu was. So we'll see. Sebastian Fundora also may come out with adjustments, but I do believe that Tim Tszyu's counter-punching ability, will more than likely win him today, but you never know. We'll see. So I'm going to predict Tim Tszyu by that of a majority or unanimous decision. So we'll see. But anyways, those are my fight predictions. I'm going to try to go live for the Usyk fight tomorrow, and we'll see what happens. You never know. I'm going with Oleksandr Usyk, but I do give Dubois a chance in this fight. I do say that he can possibly win this fight. But anyways, that pretty much is about it for today. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll talk to you all later.